Hey, hi, Jensina.
Hi, folks. Sorry for being late.
Cena. All right, we've got quorum.
So, shall I call the meeting to order? Our first order of business is approving the agenda. Are there any questions about the agenda? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda. As Holly sent out.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you. I'm sorry for these formalities, but we might as well do it right. Okay. Do we have minutes of the last meeting to review, to approve? Are there any questions about the minutes, or can I see a motion to approve?
A motion to approve.
Second.
There's a second. Okay. Any discussion? Nothing to change? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. It's unanimous. All right. Moving on to our subject for discussion, which is the policies of the Seattle, Portland, Bend, and Salem police departments. And Sergeant Jordan may have additional material. Do you think it would be appropriate to start with you, or shall we start going through the departments?
We could do it however you'd like. I just have a few clarifications for specifically responding to your outline for discussion. Just hitting on the stuff where you and I met, I didn't have necessarily some set in stone answers about what stuff we have, who our coordinators are, and some of it is covered where we might have thought it wasn't. So it's totally up to you if we want to go through kind of like whichever.
Why don't we look at the departments first and then look at the outline for discussion, because I think that might be where we can most profitably spend our time.
Yeah, I like that.
I would report that the Seattle department's policy, while the longest, has the least to do with us. It is a policy put in place through the consent agreement up there, and it is primarily oriented towards what it calls its early intervention policy, which is to identify officers who are doing things out of policy or doing things that indicate that they are problematical, and initiates a series of actions and delineates closely and in detail the responsibility of the sergeant, the lieutenant, the captain, and on up, so that you know if someone messes up, who gets the stick. It mentions officer health and wellness in the third paragraph, and the words do not recur anywhere in the 17 pages. I don't think it really is very helpful to us, although it offers a model, probably an inappropriate model, but a model of a structured matrix of actions that initiate automatic reactions by the department intervening on the possibility that an officer is not doing well in one way or another. There's something to look at there, but I don't think we need to spend any time on it. Does anyone who's looked through it have anything further to add on that? Any questions or any reason we should spend more time on it? Seeing none, move on to Portland. Portland, would anyone else like to report on Portland, or shall I? Okay, Portland has 4 pages, and they focus on critical incidents. In fact, their policy is labeled critical incidents. It has some very interesting aspects, I think, that we should keep in the back of our minds. In terms of leave from service, there is a great deal of discussion and definition in there about the different categories of people who may be impacted by critical incidents, and emphasizes the importance of providing people with time off after these incidents. When we had our discussion at the commission, the chief seemed to be expressing the feeling that we should focus tightly on officer-involved shootings. These are the only ones for which we could afford to give time off to officers, and it was mandated by state law how this was done, and that if we began giving time off for officers who were involved in critical incidents, we would soon have no one on the streets. I thought he was maybe overselling the case a little. Portland focuses rather sharply on this. For example, after being involved in an officer-involved shooting or other critical incident, which they define more widely as one that impacts officers emotionally, physically, mentally, that there is a follow-up with a mental health professional mandated, not just once within 6 months, with the second being voluntary, but once, and then at 3 months, and then at 6 months, and then at 12 months, and all of those are mandatory. Which is, I'm not saying we adopt that, but it's something to think about, that it's there, and it has been used by other departments. Because it is becoming clear to me in my discussions with people and in reading these policies that time away after something very upsetting is very important. And while understanding well in a tight budget situation, a tight staffing situation, any investment of officer time away from the job has to be considered very seriously. I think there is also a very strong argument for saying it is investment in a valued and valuable resource to give people enough time to recover so that we don't lose them down the line in one way or another. Okay, any questions on Portland? I suggest you all read it. It goes into good, considerable detail about impacted members as opposed to just those who pull a trigger. And I think has much valuable material. Any questions? Discussion? I hope I'm
Do you think that Portland is better staffed to be able to absorb placing these officers on leave?
I doubt it. I doubt any department is overstaffed, but I do not know.
And do we know if Portland's mental health provider is embedded at PPB, or is it just one in the community that they're utilizing their EAP for?
They talk about the EAP a good deal. And for example, their peer support, every one of these departments has a peer support policy, and they all read fairly similarly to ours. In fact, word for word in many cases. In Portland, a post-critical incident stress debrief is conducted by the mental health professional from the EAP with the help of the peer support coordinator. Here, it is done by the peer support coordinator. And there are various variations of this that have to do with confidentiality, identified, I think, as a key question. If the mental health professional conducts it, the secrecy rules in the room are one sort, and if it's done by the peer support people, they are of a different sort. And that's an important consideration. Did that answer?
Well, it was kind of a non-question anyway, so that's fine.
Okay.
Can I add something? I'm so sorry.
Please.
One thing that's kind of up for not interpretation, but one thing I'm trying to figure out right now, specifically for our post-critical incident response policy, is we do have in policy that the PSRT coordinator will do the debrief. There is something in our policy, I'm sure you saw, about an expectation of confidentiality. I don't understand myself how that could be, with it being a group and the person running it not being a QMHP. We're delving into that, especially in light of Senate Bill 111. to make sure that we're hitting those mandatory marks as well. I just want to put that out there that that's kind of something I'm still trying to dig into and understand. So.
Okay. All right. Amelia, anything to add?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, Bend and Salem are closer to us in size, and like us, are a small city rather than a large city like Portland or Seattle. And I would assume there is a good deal more relevance in their policies to what we could do than Portland and Seattle. Okay, and I have them right here. All right. They're quite similar. Salem goes into a great deal more detail. It's Bend is like 4 pages and Salem is 8. 2 pages of the 8 in Salem are devoted to the comfort dog program. Every aspect of it is delineated in great and loving detail. And my first reaction was to laugh. But I since had a conversation both with an officer who told me that they thought that was the greatest one of these many alternatives being offered in wellness programs for stress relief. And I spoke to a family member who's involved in intensive mental health therapy 5 days a week, who told me in the group that he's in, one therapy dramatically changed the tenor of the room. He said people who've been raped, people who are just trembling hulks and can't hardly look at anyone or say anything, they walked in a dog and the whole room went, ah. And he said it is consistently the most immediately visibly effective therapy that he's seen. And so I stopped laughing and I started listening a little bit. But okay, Salem and Bend are not that dissimilar. Salem goes into a good deal more in the way of definitions, which I thought was quite good, because what I've heard from our peer support coordinator has been very focused on critical incident support over a 72-hour period or less, and has stated that the worst of stress dissipates after 72 hours. And I just listened to a copy up where the chief was talking to Officer Johns, who was involved in 3 officer-involved shootings, and talked about it. One of them, it was 6 months before he started feeling like he was anything like himself. He totally freaked out for a period of 6 months. And I think a good deal of what Salem talks about is worth looking at in terms of, just like Portland's, making a much broader definition of critical incident and who's involved in a critical incident and could need support of one kind or another. Okay, I know I could be better organized here. One thing that both Bend and Salem have that I would strongly recommend be in our policy is Salem sets up a wellness committee with representatives from various parts of the department. Bend has a wellness coordinator, and I would strongly argue in favor of one person having responsibility, reporting to the chief, and having oversight over all the aspects, including the peer support, including the various wellness programs available, including the mental health aspect, and helping to define that policy, define the list of critical incidents if we want a list. Or we could just say those that emotionally and physically and mentally affect those officers involved, and keep it loose. Yes, Jensina, thank you.
So are we recommending oversight or insight? As far as if we're going to get into semantics, do we want this person to have authority over them, or do we want that person to have transparency into those processes?
That's wide open. I am thinking of someone to coordinate the program, to be on top of all aspects of it, to report to the chief on it, to audit it, and to help form it, to find new ways to do it, and the like. Holly, go ahead.
We do have someone that we have two. Our peer support resiliency team. We've got Emily McCauley, which you guys have met before. We also have Sergeant Sean McCauley, who they oversee that, and then the deputy chief, who they report to. And so we do have that in-house, and they are actively working on wellness incentives and ideas and programs and whatnot. So that is in place.
The deputy chief does what exactly? I missed a few words.
He is their direct report. So the two supervisors of the peer support and resiliency team, they report directly to the deputy chief, and it comes out of his budget.
Okay, but there is no overall wellness person who handles things outside of the peer support is one thing. I understand that, and that is an important aspect in every department's policy, it seemed to me.
There is a leg of it that is wellness focused. So they're doing the peer support stuff, and they're also doing wellness.
The same people are responsible for both.
Yes.
Okay.
So could I add something?
Please.
Yeah, and I think, Holly, I would add on to that to say, as far as my understanding is that Emily McCauley is in charge of all of the wellness related things, and one of them happens to be PSRT that she supervises, but she also is in charge of all of the educational stuff. That includes when we have people come talk about law enforcement, wellness, mental health, suicide prevention, stuff like that, which we do have a lot of that training throughout the year. And then secondarily, she also is the one that spearheaded our cardiac study for officers to get screening. She's the one that handled the yoga and all of that stuff, but a lot of this is funding dependent. So, but she's our appointed wellness coordinator for all intents and purposes. So,
okay,
there you go.
Okay, well, that's excellent. I mean, I think it could be formalized in that it seems, from what I've read, it seems to be just the peer support aspect that where the responsibility lies for the peer support coordinator. But boosting that position to be formally recognized as dealing with this, and this. In terms of the question Jensina asked, what I would see that person, whoever it is and whatever their title is, coordinating programs, not being involved necessarily in carrying out the programs, auditing them, arranging the protocols for their use, and generally advocating for them in the department. Overseeing the education aspect that we just talked about, but not deciding you need this, you got to go there. That I would not see as a responsibility of the wellness coordinator. But on all these questions, I'm just learning, and I do not have hard and fast this way or that way. What I've been looking at is many of the policies have got a positive and a less positive aspect, and there are choices to be made. And some of them are yes or no choices. You can't compromise it, and others probably can be. And okay, let's see. Other from Salem, same peer support policy. And both Salem and Bend, I believe, list the same kind of education policies that were just referred to by Sergeant Jordan, that in part of training, there are a number of topics dealing with mental health and wellness that need to be covered, and I assume are, but this would bring them under one person, which they are now already. Is that correct? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
I'm learning. And it's a little hard for me, both running the meeting, doing all the talking and trying to keep it all straight. Such head as remains. Okay. In terms of how we proceed, I wrote up that outline for how to conduct this discussion. Did people get a chance to look at that?
I'm looking at it right now, Jack.
Okay.
Commissioner Rady, my apologies. I'll be professional.
I'm not offended by Jack. At the commission where Jensina's in charge, we better get the titles right. But here, just three of us, five of us, hey. Okay, the first point that I tried to make in that outline was we don't have a stated policy on health and wellness, and I would include mental health under health. It's a very important aspect, and I think it would serve the department well to have, there are policies or procedures. There's a couple procedures and there's one policy which relate to this, but to pull it all together into one body of policy, I think would be of benefit. The main benefit being it emphasizes its importance. And I noted that a number of other departments have done so. We have not yet done so, although we're undertaking many of the same steps. But to bring it together, have it in one policy and under one coordinator, I think would help highlight it and make it perhaps more of a priority than it is at the moment. I can't speak on how much of a priority it is at the moment, though. But I do recognize it as a very important aspect and was a little disturbed to find that we didn't have the policy specifically focused this way.
Commissioner Rady? Oh, I'm sorry.
Please.
So is that in regards to all EPD staff or specifically just patrol officers?
I think it's clearly going to impact line staff more than support staff, but I wouldn't want to carry that too far. The more stressful parts of the job, I think, lie out on the streets, but that's not necessarily just restricted to patrol.
Okay.
But I think it should cover the entire department.
I agree. And that was my thought is, somebody who's maybe working in archives or having to handle evidence, maybe they're exposed to materials they're maybe not accustomed to. That could be really traumatizing. So the EPD as a whole, I like having a wellness. So Sergeant Jordan, is there anything, I know there's, well, I can't say I know, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. But is there anything currently within like the agreement between the oh my gosh, I'm sorry, words, EPD union? Is there language in a contract or is there any language that currently talks about that anywhere besides just the policy page?
So that's actually one of the things I was going to bring up. Yeah, right now, a lot of this stuff, maybe beyond PSRT, more like the workout policy and some of this other wellness stuff, it's entirely covered by kind of these informal agreements and MOUs. It hasn't been codified necessarily into union contracts at this point. However, my understanding is it's being bargained currently. And yeah, I mean, I guess I hope that answers your question, really. Yeah.
It does. So I have another question.
Yeah.
So if it's between the union and that language in those bargaining agreements, can that then be written into policy and just be like all other policy updated as it needs to be? Or does that have to be separate? I'm showing my ignorance. I really don't know the difference.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good point. I I tend actually, Jack, for correction, Commissioner Rady and I met, and I think we agreed on so much, but I'm remiss to say that I honestly think it would be better for us to keep some of these policies stand alone, because I think as we can codify and have them apply to the best benefit for all people in the department where applicable, and keep them as comprehensive as possible within their individual policies, I think that'll make it easier for us to do that, where everybody, I forget what you were saying about the having it be codified in the different agreements, because not everybody is EPEA. But so, for instance, the policies that apply to EPEA represented people, or the other unions that are represented within the department, it would be nice to mention those individually within that policy that's applicable and have it codified. So, but that's again why I might suggest we have these policies each be individual, yet still managed by the same coordinator. So.
Thank you, Sergeant. May I ask, when we say separate, would that look like a non-representative employee has its own policy, and then a representative employee would have its own policy specific to the wellness piece?
No, I think that say if we determine, or if the department determines with the city and the chief that every work group can avail themselves to the benefit of the on-duty workout program, for instance, in that policy, we will mention based on bargaining agreements with XYZ units and or their representation, or we can just say this will apply to all work units at EPD. Then we can make sure that each unit is represented based on what is individually bargained, also acknowledging that these things will happen on different timelines and may, for instance, there may be programmatic changes that need to be made to individual policies. And that makes it a little bit easier to keep it within each individual policy rather than have this big overarching one. Also, I think we already have a lot of these policies as standalone policies, and it would probably behoove us to have each of those looked at and revised as needed. But we only have to add in, like, if we want to talk about the QMHP policy, having, that was one of Commissioner Rady's recommendations, but we have a lot of other ones that are already kind of standing on their own. So it would be kind of a significant change to cram them all together into one, and a big undertaking.
Okay, thank you so much, Sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand it's a big undertaking at exactly the time you're taking off for a while. And I don't know, is someone filling in as policy sergeant during that period?
I'm not sure yet at this point. We haven't really worked out those details yet, so.
Okay, so the question's been raised whether we're better off with an overall policy or separate policies because of the different jurisdictions of representation within the department. Is that correct?
I think that's one aspect of it, certainly.
Could you give me an example, so I understand it better, of a situation in which a policy would be different? Now, we have a bargaining unit for the rank and file. We have a bargaining unit for sergeants. What other bargaining units are there? I'm not familiar with the structure.
As far as I know, we have non-represented employees. We have EPEA, which are officers. We have a sergeant's unit that is in progress right now for bargaining. And then I believe we might even have some AFSCME employees.
Yes, support staff.
Yeah.
Okay. And what would be an example of a policy that would make sense to be different for different bargaining units, or a policy that would apply differently and would make sense to be split up into different policy sections? I'm not getting the connection. I believe you,
Yeah.
but I don't understand.
No, I guess I'm not advocating that they be split up and, like our evidence unit have their own policy for workout and our patrol have their own policy for workout. I'm not advocating for that. I'm advocating that the policies stay Under a wellness umbrella, we maintain a separate policy for on-duty workout time, for peer support, for training and education. We put our health and wellness stuff under that. You know what I mean? So kind of keep them in the relevant places, I guess, was more of it.
I'm not quite catching it. Jensina.
So I would also recommend looking at the delineation that Dr. Clary Boos made when she wrote the grant that City of Eugene was trying to get for EPD for the law enforcement mental health and wellness professional, because there was a certain group of employees who would have benefited from that particular grant. And I believe it was going to be patrol officers, dispatchers, and forensic investigators, but I don't know how Dr. Boos arrived at that delineation. And so there may be more information there.
This is going to be complicated.
I could check in with Clary Boos if that would help and get back to the group.
Please. Please. Okay. So the question of that there should be one unified policy is not necessarily agreed on and will require further discussion. The question of a coordinator for the overall policy different from the peer support team is also not resolved and needs considerable further discussion. We could proceed with either of these at this point, or we could go on with the outline and just see where we're at on the different aspects of it, whatever people think would be more productive with our time. We have about 25 minutes left in this hour. I think we're doing okay.
So, Jack, are you putting it out there that you would like to see perhaps a dedicated wellness staff member that's their sole job? It would be full-time, that's their position within the department?
Yes. In order to emphasize its importance within the department.
May I ask how realistic budget-wise does that look like? Okay.
Not realistic, but I love the idea, but it's just the city of Eugene as a whole is in dire straits.
Okay. So
But sorry, it doesn't mean you guys can't try or make that recommendation. You know, I always say, you know, let's go for it.
Sergeant Jordan, did you have your hand? Yeah.
Yes, sorry. I just wanted to add one thing that I agree, budget-wise, it probably isn't realistic, but also I think we would be throwing away a wealth of information and knowledge and experience that our current coordinator has. I think that's why she specifically is able to oversee PSRT, but also be very adept at training recommendations and getting people connected with the proper mental health professionals and helping us develop that list of eligible people that are law enforcement culturally competent or aware, and all of the above. And I know that we have a great group of people who, yes, a lot of them are PSRT, but many of them have gone to extensive trainings. And as we move forward with our wellness, which is prioritized based on all of these different policies we have that aren't, under one umbrella, we know that, they are going to be well suited to move into that role potentially. So we're kind of setting ourselves up for still success, even if we don't have a dedicated person where that's their only job. We're still investing those resources intelligently and kind of responsibly in our leadership and in our programmatic, as we move forward. So I'll just put that out there.
So we could basically avoid the budget question if the peer support coordinator we currently have had their duties expanded somewhat to cover formally these other aspects of health and wellness.
So
Commissioner Hawkins.
I would propose that we look at it as developing policy to support and enforce the work that is already being done by the coordinator at EPD. Because not only do we want to have it in writing that this is how EPD operates, we also want to solidify and make sure that she is receiving credit for the work that she's already doing. I don't think that we are in a position to fix what ain't broke. And so this process, even though I think the part that we have identified that's broken that we can work on is policy, but the process itself is still there. The coordinator is still there. The work is being done. As far as I can tell, it's not written out in a way that police commission would be able to review as an actual policy.
I would agree with that. I think that's a great way to put it. Sorry.
It sounds like it's more internalized policy, kind of knowledge base within the department as a whole, and doesn't necessarily apply to the outside world, just more for their folks. So you had mentioned the standalone policies and maybe updating them with a little, maybe not a little, but updating them with wording might be the best method to move forward, as it's not a huge undertaking and it can be done piece by piece, kind of what we're already doing. So I'm just going to throw this out here. Can we help with that? Can we help update wording? I don't want to put this all on you, Sergeant Jordan, because that's not fair and you're already doing a ton of work. So is there anything that we can do as a committee to help incorporate some of this wording, or maybe even draft some wording that would be helpful for you to incorporate into those standalone policies related to health and wellness?
I think that's a great idea. Honestly, I'm not as concerned about it being too much work. I think there's already a lot there and we have some great kind of content to work with, but I am absolutely in agreement that we could kind of get on paper these informal processes that we're already doing, just to make sure that it's what we want and we can look at ways to improve that sort of thing. So I think we could look at the policies we have already, and we could also look at what do we need to add in, what new policies do we need to kind of achieve what Commissioner Rady was, your goal was to have this overarching program that has all the needs met. So yeah, I think if we do all that, that sounds fantastic to me. I'm happy to participate in that and take the assistance of the commission and all of your expertise and input and try and make it what we want.
Can I ask
And all that-
realistic? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Please. I was just going to ask, realistically, is that more for us, for the public to look at policy and read it? Or would it actually help and improve the overall well-being of the EPD as a whole? Is it, I guess, am I saying, is it just fluff work for to appease the masses, or does it actually help putting it in writing for the folks working at EPD?
Oh, I think it would certainly only improve things. I don't think that there's much negative that could come from that. So, I mean, we all have an interest in having a healthy and, you know, mentally well and well supported work group here at EPD based on the service we're providing to the community. So I don't think that there's much negative that could come from that.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Yeah.
Do I remember what I was about to say? Okay. Give me a senior moment here. Oh dear. Okay. Of the program that we hope would be represented in policy, this would include the peer support and resiliency team, all the various voluntary wellness procedures that the department already has, and some others that might want to swipe from other departments. There are a multitude of ideas. I've talked to a number of people. One guy was just raving about massage chairs, that they installed one and they were going to raise money to get another one, because at the end of a shift, being able to spend 45 minutes in the chair just left them able to relax from, a difficult day. The comfort dog, and all the rest of that under one aspect. And with those being checked on, are people using them? Do they work? How do people like them? What do people dislike about them? What could be changed? Has anybody got an idea of something we could add? Or, is that one just a waste of time? And, because individuals are different things will serve different people. There's a big question that we are going to have to wrestle with. And that is the question of an on-site mental health professional or qualified mental health professional. There are two approaches that I have run across. The one is to have a qualified psychiatrist, psychologist, whichever, on site, available to department members when they need someone to talk to, able to provide therapy. The second approach, which is used in other places, involves having a licensed social worker on premises who people can talk to, but who can then refer them so that the mental health therapy is not being done on the premises by someone who is employed by the department, where there is, of course, complete confidentiality between the professional and their patient. But there is a lot of question whether that theory actually is in practice. And confidentiality being one of the biggest obstacles to officers seeking care. I am more impressed so far by the arguments in favor of someone who can refer from the police headquarters than someone who conducts therapy there. Obviously, the person knows how to listen and knows what to hear and knows what, well, that person might be a good person for you to talk to, given what you told me. Then we run into a problem. I was told by one person that the list that the department maintains of mental health professionals who are both trauma qualified, trained, or experienced to deal with first responder trauma, who are willing to see police officers at all, and who are still in practice and still in the area, is small. I have been told it numbers 5. And that an attempt to call the list found a lot of numbers that were on it that were not, in fact, in the area, still in practice, seeing officers, or were qualified. I will bring this up right here, and we can do with it what we want, but my wife has volunteered to call every mental health professional in the state of Oregon, or at least in this half of the state. In the Eugene area, she says, okay, not the state. But I think would have to go further. But nonetheless, that'd be a terrific help to find out who's up for it, who's qualified for it, who's willing to do it. And that would just add to the list. Someone has to do that job. We need to gain that resource because we don't apparently currently have it. And once again, I'm going off what people have told me. But they seem to be well qualified to speak. Yes.
Just one thing I want to add, hopefully, to the qualifications list is somebody who is also culturally aware. That's been a big thing. So yes, the confidentiality and trauma informed, but culturally aware is the hardest thing to come across. It sounds like so.
Okay. And that's a question we will need to discuss. I don't think we should do this today. We can begin it, but I don't think we can conclude it today. But it's a fundamental question because I've heard some indication the department would like to hire an actual mental health professional on site to do work there. And I've been hearing feedback from a variety of places saying, no, that is not the right way to do it. But I don't know. Once again, I'm not all that qualified. Any questions on this particular subject? Hearing none. I don't know much about the city EAP. And I need to find out more about that. Anyone who could point me where to look.
Yeah,
Holly,
I'd be happy to put you in contact with our employee resource center that can get you that information. I don't know if they can provide you with a ton of information or a little bit of information, but I'll definitely put you in contact with someone that
Okay.
can start
That's
that
great.
process.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
I can
Um,
speak personally to the EAP as an individual who has an EAP accessible. They're okay. It's very, 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 very basic. It is like super basic. And so I don't use it because I have created my own world of knowledgeable people and worked on that. And it sounds like, I'm going to say their name wrong, Sergeant Macaulay, Emily Macaulay, is wealth knowledge. And she's essentially the 211 slash guru of resources for the EPD. And I know from experience with there's 211, which is anybody can access potential resources at any time within any community they're in. It's very, very, very basic. It's not always updated. And to try and update that due to the turnover and just budgeting and funding throughout the community and resources, it changes so frequently. It is hard to keep up on those resources. So I think connecting with Emily Macaulay in some way, shape, or form, she's the gold mine there. She's going to know all the things. That's my guess.
I will do my best to talk to her. Absolutely.
I'm happy to help with that if you'd like.
Please. Yes. Under mental health care, in addition to the question of in-house or out-house, in the EAP, there is considerable variation in the different departments I looked at over when and by whom a qualified mental health professional visit can be authorized or mandated. And with Portland clearly talking in terms of 4 mandated visits under some circumstances, this question is open, with the one end of it being it's all voluntary. If you feel like you're not doing well, you certainly have the right and ability to take sick days, to contact a mental health professional, to set up your own therapy. You have a certain amount of visits guaranteed by your contract and your medical plan. Under some circumstances, administrative leave can be given or mandated, and this is different in different departments, with Eugene seemingly toward the tight end of the scale. And everyone I talked to emphasized its importance of having time off under some circumstances. I know 2 elements of the bargaining unit are raising the question of sabbaticals in their current discussion, which is wonderful. I think a great suggestion, and I hope this is successful, because this is time away from stress is one of the sovereign cures. If not cure, at least helps. And then the question of who can say, hang on a second, 1 moment break. See you, dear. Okay. My wife goes off to her afternoon shift. And my mind goes out the window. Right. Okay. There's a broad list of situations. The sergeant notices that this officer is been much suddenly very quiet. Usually they're ebullient. This person seems to be lost in space during briefings. They never were that before. Something's going on. What happens next? The sergeant goes and says, "How you doing? Just check up on the person." Is there a point where you say, This seems to be affecting the person's work. Now what? Suggest to the person they get help? Order them to get help? Send someone from peer counseling to talk to them? You know, all these, and there are all different levels of this. It's very hard to define, but one thing stands out, to me at least, is that the reticence for fear around confidentiality to seek help has been an ongoing aspect of law enforcement culture. This is changing with newer people coming in, but it is still a very significant factor. And it's a very tricky and sensitive question because, among other things, I have a concern that the people who are most resistant to seeking help are likely the persons most in need of it, at least some of them. And how you then bridge that gap without offending people who feel, yeah, I'm not crazy, you know, it's just a hard job, you know, yeah, okay, I'm a little down, but I'm fine. Fine. Leave me alone. You know, maybe not. I think you could use a few days off. You know, once you get that vacation. All of that is going to have to be talked through. And I don't necessarily see us as the most qualified persons to talk through it. In that regard, I had a ride along last Saturday with Sergeant McIntyre, which was very good. It was not a very busy Saturday. And as a result, we got a lot of time to talk about this very subject. And it turned out that she's going to a conference on law enforcement, health, and wellness right about now, or next week, or the week after that. And we'll be back before our next meeting, I hope, and is perfectly happy to report and asked me to look at the list of workshops and say, what do you want me to go to? I'm going to the one with the Labrador retrievers, guaranteed. But so I gave her a list of 14 that looked interesting to me and said, you know, obviously you can't go to all of them, but these are the ones that, you know, and I think she will bring back a lot of interesting stuff for our next meeting. If people would like that to happen, I think it will happen. Comments? We're going to have to sort some of this stuff out. And there are a lot of, you know, this way or that ways, and they're far from entirely clear. But I think we can have useful discussion on it and pass on to both Sergeant Jordan and the department our thoughts on it. It won't be definitive, and it'll just be, I think, pointing to directions we want policy to go rather than nailing down this and not that, that, not this. But I think it would benefit the department to have this policy in place to point to and given some priority. That's
I appreciate the work you've done to pull all this information together for us to review, Jack.
It was fun. I learned a lot. I really, this is a fascinating subject, and
It is.
There's a great deal to it. I wish we had more resources. I looked up the Oregon, what is it, the Oregon Knowledge Bank? Something like that. It's got a formal name, and it's a series of articles on law enforcement, mostly or much of it around these subjects. None of it directly on what I wanted, of course, but research papers. And the more of this we have, the more effective we can be. Now, I want to address the question, just for one moment, of budget, which is several people looked at this as that these are great ideas, but it's unlikely to be done because things cost money and we're tight for money. And I just want to say that is an argument against ever doing anything. There is never a time when there are adequate resources for everything that needs doing. I think we can recommend and we can be right patient if we realize it doesn't happen immediately. But we can look at what would be seems to be best to us and urge it. And budgetary considerations are always there. Something's got to give to make something else happen. There may be not enough for anything to happen properly. But that's not a reason to just go, oh, we can't do anything. Or we end up in a very bad spot. So I would just like to keep pushing. And when it runs up against a solid wall of, sorry, there's no money for it. Okay. You know, we pushed, we did our job. Someday the rich may pay their taxes and then we'll all be able to do our jobs. That'd be nice. On that note, did I hear an amen?
I said, hear, hear.
All right. Is there any further business that we can conduct today? Anything anyone would like to add? I
Not for me.
apologize for talking so much.
I agree with Jensina. Thank you so much, Jack, for delving into these topics and, you know, grabbing samples from all over. It's pretty awesome. Thank you for keeping the conversation going and bringing forth these ideas. And thank you for being here, Sergeant Jordan.
Yes, indeed.
We appreciate you.
It really helps. Just spinning our ignorance past each other is not the most productive. I just want to urge the other members of the subcommittee, jump in. There are many police departments in the United States, and many of them have their policies posted online. All you got to do is go hunting and see what you come up with. There will be more material that I will be sending out. Please read your homework. It makes these meetings so much more productive. And I will not be giving out grades, however. Fear not. With no further questions, thank you all for coming, and we will report back to the next commission on such progress as we have managed.
Thank you.
Thank you.